So, we've all dreamt of traveling to another world before, right? Well, I'm sure that we didn't think it'd turn out quite as dangerous or as weird as this one did. In today's video, I'll be reviewing the anime Suicide Squad Isekai, which has just recently ended. And I'll be giving a general overview of the series, as well as my thoughts and opinions on the themes and characters of the show, and give a final rating on, well, if I recommend it or not. So to start off, the premise of it is that Amanda Waller, who we all know is, the boss lady of the Suicide Squad, right? She wants to gather resources from another world. Now, how she came up with the idea of going to another plane of existence, I don't know, but that also doesn't surprise me considering it's Waller that we're talking about. Now, she creates Task Force X, aka the Suicide Squad, to basically establish a base of operations in this new world. And she does this because why would she waste or risk the lives of, good citizens, good soldiers, when she can just send a bunch of criminals over there? Now, whether you agree morally or not is right, but it makes a lot of sense if you take a step back to think about it. And in this particular iteration of Task Force X, it includes Harley Quinn, Deadshot, King Shark, Clayface, and Peacemaker, who all have these bombs placed in their necks because, again, we're dealing with criminals and she needs a way to control them. And if you know anything about Amanda Waller or Suicide Squad in general, that she is not one to be messed with. And she was dead serious about blowing their heads up. Now, this is okay or good in theory, but the reality is that Harley and the rest of the squad were met with persecution and a lot of setbacks coming to the new world. I mean, heck, going through the portal, they end up crash landing because they were shot out of the sky, which already put a little dent into their plan, so to speak, right? And not only that, come to find out that they weren't the first team to be sent over there in the first place. Waller had already dispatched a first group of Suicide Squad, and for whatever reason that still wasn't really clear to me by the end of the season, that they had somehow broken away from Waller's control. I do know for a fact that the bombs that they had didn't have a countdown associated, which is the reason why Harley's squad does, because Waller was like, you're not going to get me twice. So now Harley, Deadshot, and the rest of the gang, they're crash landed on this new world they have no idea what's going on in terms of what's going on with the world. They have these bombs in their neck that they have to reset every 72 hours or pop. And they're dealing with Waller's crazy self giving them orders. So it's not really the best thing. And then to top it all off, the kingdom that they're supposed to be working with, I guess is the best way to put it, is ruled by this crazy queen who's really just trying to kill them at every turn. And this just kind of adds to the pressure that they're all kind of under. Now, it's kind of a very rough synopsis of what's going on in the story. And watching it for throughout these 10 episodes, oftentimes felt kind of like a fever dream. And what I mean by that is that first and foremost, the animation and art style is fantastic. It's absolutely gorgeous, and that gets to be a 10 out of 10 for me. But there were times where it was just kind of dynamic, I guess, like it was changing so much, especially some high action sequences, like when they fought against the dragon, or later on had the final battle against the undead army. There was a lot going on, and at times it just felt not really out of place, but it was just a little weird for me. And same thing with the pacing. The pacing of the story felt a little all over the place. It felt like it didn't know how long the story wanted to be until like that episode. For instance, the original goal was to set up a base of operations to gather resources, and then by the end of the series, or end of the season rather, they're fighting an undead army of some undead king who honestly wasn't really mentioned at all up until that point, like maybe the episode prior. But you're talking about the last 2 episodes in a 10 episode season, and this is the first time we've was really introduced to this character. That's the part that kind of felt off to me. I felt a little rushed. I think they could have maybe dropped some type of, I don't know, hint or something throughout the earlier episodes, but again, wasn't a deal breaker for me, but it's just something I took note of. And another thing is, for the characters we did have, especially for Harley and the rest of the Suicide Squad, I wish they spent a little more time fleshing out the characters. I mean, yes, these are DC characters who have numerous comics and, years upon years, like decades of history behind them. But the average fan wouldn't have read all of these things to know every little detail about these characters, with the exception of maybe Harley Quinn herself because of her association with the Joker. Now, I could be wrong, I'm not the biggest DC nerd out there, but that's just kind of the vibe I got while I was watching this. And I think a little insight into each of the characters' past would have made the show a little more enjoyable for me. I mean, it doesn't have to be like a whole episode dedicated to these characters, but just kind of like how they did with Harley against the Thinker, just a little bit of, okay, this is how she was before, becoming Harley Quinn, which she was still Harleen Quinzel, and basically lead up to now, right? Just a little more of that, I think, would have done wonders, at least for me watching it. And another thing is, I wish we had more moments with the actual members of the Suicide Squad interacting with each other, because they started off not really caring at all for each other. Like if they die, they die. To at the end, they become albeit a dysfunctional one, a pretty solid team that works well together. And I mean, I understand the circumstances were dire and there was no time to be all buddy with each other, but it did feel kind of weird how you have a bunch of criminals who are very dominant in how they are. Like, none of them are pushovers, right? They're all very much used to doing their own thing. And you mean to tell me you just throw them all together and threaten death over them, and now all of a sudden they're a cohesive unit? Okay, that may be a little far-fetched. I know they're not exactly cohesive, but I think you understand what I'm trying to get at here. It's just little weird, just little things like that. I know it was only 10 episodes, and this probably can be spread out to like 20 to 30, right? But these are just some of the things that I looked at and I saw while I was watching it. Now, when it comes to the themes of Suicide Squad Isekai, the biggest one that I kind of gleaned while I was watching it is the idea of survival, because every faction that's involved in this is trying to survive, right? Waller's trying to get resources for Earth. The Suicide Squad has actual bombs in their heads that, if they don't do the job, then off they go. And there's a war going on in the world that they've been isekai'd into, right? So each faction is pining for their survival, and they're willing to do anything, and I mean anything, in order to survive. I think this is something that a lot of Christians kind of shy away from, is the reality of what it means to survive, and especially there's a war going on, right? And the reason I say that is because from each perspective, the people, they think what they're doing is for the greater good of their people, and we're taught as Christians to just leave those type of things to God. I agree with, there's certain lines that you shouldn't have to cross, that you shouldn't cross, but at the same time, we have to participate in the things that we want to achieve with God's timing, of course. But I do know when it comes to the morally gray area of survival and what is appropriate or not, kind of gets things muddied up, and it's just a lot. So I'm not going to bore you with all that detail and whatever. If you want to share your thoughts and opinions, feel free to type in the comments below, and I'll make sure to answer any questions or comments you may have. But again, the overall theme of survival was pretty just kind of in your face about it. And another kind of sidebar or side theme is the idea of morality too, because even though Harley Quinn and Deadshot and all of them are the heroes of the story of this anime, we can't forget that they are criminals who have done horrendous things, especially Harley, because she's with the Joker, and we all know how crazy and sadistic he is, and she's just right there with him. So I found myself when I was watching it just almost like not really surprised, but just kind of like, oh yeah, I forgot these Jokers are criminals, right? They are not good guys at all. Some of them, like Deadshot, like Peacemaker, and I guess Harley Quinn at times too, can be considered anti-heroes. So they kind of do what they want, regardless of the law or justice and all that type of stuff. But yeah, they're not heroes. So I don't know. I just thought that was a nice little thing to remind myself of. Now, as for the characters, and again, it's a very colorful bunch. So I'm gonna start off with probably the most colorful of them all, right? Harley Quinn herself. Now, Harley is a nice mix of crazy and brilliant because oftentimes she's this just unpredictable wild card that is she's equally dangerous for her allies and her enemies. But one thing that I did really like about this iteration of Harley, and seems to be the case for most iterations of her when she's by herself, is that they showed more of her like actual brilliant side than just the crazy girlfriend of the Joker. Because at least some of the things that I've seen in past other animated shows and whatnot, it seems like when she's with the Joker, she's just like the Joker's girl. But like we seem to forget that Harley and honestly the vast majority of Batman's rogue gallery are all very smart people. Like I'm talking like they have doctorates in whatever their field is, and Harley's no different. So it was nice to see just those moments of oh yeah, she's actually a really smart person. She's still crazy. Like don't get me wrong, it's not overshadowing the craziness, but the brilliant side is in there too. So I just thought that was nice. And it was also kind of funny to see how Harley more or less became like the de facto leader of the group, or at the very least the one to get things going. So when the boys are bickering or whatever, trying to be macho, whatever the case may be, Harley just goes over and just does something and gets something done, whether it's disruptive or not. It's neither here nor there, but she does something and then the rest kind of follow suit, even if it's just an attempt to clean up her mess, which I thought was pretty funny. And another caveat is that unbeknownst to her, she was actually the driving force for, I'd argue, like 90% of the stuff that happened in this first season. And without spoiling more than that, because if you haven't seen the last episode, then I don't know why you're watching a review video, but hey, since you're already here, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more, anime goodness. Now, next I want to go over is Deadshot, who's, the team marksman, right? The sniper of the team, the guns and glory type of guy. And at first, he was, in my mind, like the stereotypical angry black man. Like he just had an attitude, was always, he wasn't irresponsible with his anger. Like he wasn't just flying off the handle, but he was just like, he's always had a scowl on his face, which to be fair is understandable, right? I'd probably be pretty pissed off too if somebody took me out of my cell, put a bomb in my head and say, here you go, you're in this new world now, do my bidding or else your head's getting blown up. So understandable, but I just thought it was interesting at first. And then of course later on he learned how to ease up more, again, as all of them did, around each other, and they had each other's back. And one of the funniest things for me is that Deadshot was pretty oblivious to how he comes across to people. Either that or he just doesn't care, with the main thing being with Ratcatcher and their time when they were in the same prison, so to speak. And I find it hard to believe that Deadshot really thought he was doing that man any favors with the things he was doing. But at the same time, I can see how he would genuinely just believe he thinks he's the good guy. It's funny. That whole thing was pretty funny to me. So yeah, Deadshot was a pretty funny character. Now next is King Shark. And in all honesty, I don't have really much to say about King Shark. King Shark's a shark. He wears overalls and he's definitely the muscle of the group. But for me personally, it was like, okay, it's just a shark man that's here. So I don't have a lot of insights on King Shark. I'm sorry for you King Shark enjoyers out there, but it just wasn't for me, I guess. But the next character is actually like my favorite one to watch in the